Hello again. Yes, again. It's me, Phil Croshaw, once again. And today in this Passions episode, I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Helen Palmer. And Helen is going to be talking to us about her passions for theatre, for dance, for film, for the arts, and everything in between. Enjoy. Hello, and yes, it's another edition of Passions. Gosh, the amount of value we're bringing to you people at the moment is off the scale. And I have another guest today, and today I'm joined by Helen Palmer. And Helen is going to talk to us about her passions and about what she does. And I'll also probably ask her about how's COVID been treating her, which seems to be a part of any conversation at the moment. So, Helen, very warm welcome to Passions. Tell us who you are and what your passion is.
Hiya, Phil. Thanks for inviting me on today. So I'm a marketing and audience development consultant, and I work across arts, culture, heritage and tourism, mainly in the UK, a little bit internationally. I started out actually thinking I was going to work in the tourism industry, having done a tourism degree. But actually, I've had a passion for the arts in the broadest sense, and including film, which is a really big passion of mine, since I was a child. I have a twin brother, Andrew, who's also my business partner, and we were very lucky as kids to be taken to the theatre, to museums and historic houses and the cinema on a regular basis by our parents. And so I don't remember a time before having that passion, and to be able to turn that into a career. I didn't know that at school. Nobody tells you that you can work in the arts if you're not actually going to be an artist, a performer or a maker. And so it was only really when I was doing the final year of my tourism degree and I took an arts management and a marketing module that I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I could do this. And then, of course, the reality hits when you try and get into the sector. It's a very competitive sector to work in, despite the fact that the hours are not great and the pay on the whole is not great. But it's because of that passion for the subject matter. And so I was lucky enough, supported by my parents, to be able to volunteer for a number of different arts organisations, and I really wanted to start working in theatre. So I did everything from front of house to box office to stage management, helping with props. I even did the sound and lighting on one show, which made me realise I really didn't want to do that, not my skill set. And eventually I was able to start working in theatre. My first, I would say, proper job in theatre was with the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, and I worked as the term, which is not a term that's used particularly now, as tour publicist, and we took The Importance of Being Earnest, Oscar Wilde's wonderful play, on tour around England. The Royal Exchange has a mobile tour unit which used to go out around the country, and it was an amazing experience. And as a result of that, I then got a job with the Library Theatre Company in Manchester, which is sadly no longer in existence, but that was two theatres, one in the basement of Central Library, hence the name, and the other in Wythenshawe, which is about 8 miles south of the city centre, called the Forum Theatre. Now that does exist, but not for theatre as we know it anymore. So I was there for about 4 years and really learnt the craft of marketing and PR in theatre and the arts. And then I felt ready for a new challenge, and I moved to the Lowry, which is the major arts centre in Salford Quays. And I was fortunate to be there when the building was being built and set up the marketing and communications and box office function. I spent a lot of time on that site in a hard hat, wellies and a high-vis vest, crawling all over the building, taking people round. I always maintained that when it opened, I knew the building better as a building site than an actual working theatre and art gallery, etc., etc. But I decided that I didn't want to go back into a venue or an arts organisation full time. I'd really got the bug for what I'd class as project-based work, something that's involved in the setting up of something.
And maybe had a finish. Maybe you could stand back and go, wow, and then move on to the next one.
Yeah, and I'd spent years in that cycle of theatre seasons and the pressure of selling tickets, and I felt like I didn't want to go back to that. And I applaud anybody who does that on a long-term basis, because it's really not easy. And so I went freelance, and I was freelance on my own for about 6 years. And one of my big projects in that was setting up and being part of the delivery team for Manchester's 2002 Commonwealth Games cultural programme, which was an extraordinary experience. And we were working across the northwest of England, but I was part funded by the Commonwealth Games team. So I was very involved in the national programme as well. We were part of that national programme. Actually, nobody remembers that bit. They'll remember Cultureshock. And the brilliant thing is that so many of the organisations that we worked with, the legacy is still visible. And years later, I was then part of the setting up the Manchester International Festival, which is a direct legacy of that Cultureshock programme. And I spent 4 years setting up and then being the marketing director for the first Manchester International Festival, which I'm hugely proud of, and has just gone from strength to strength. And partway through that process, because I realised that in order to be able to do that properly, I would have to go full time for the last year. At a time when my brother, who had worked in the arts, my brother worked for in the museums and visual arts sector in marketing, clearly a twin thing, I don't know, on being brought up with that passion. He'd then gone to work in some marketing agencies and was missing working in the arts, and I'd got too much work. I couldn't deal with it all, and so very quickly we decided to go into business together. And it meant that Andrew could look after the clients that I had, and so that I had a business when I came out of Manchester International Festival. Because again, I was asked to stay, as I had been with the Lowry, and I thought, apart from the fact it nearly killed me, I have to say, it was we were a relatively small team for the scale of what we were doing, and I was responsible for marketing, communications, box office, volunteering, and it was brilliant. It was an amazing experience, but I felt it was time to move on, and so that's when my brother and I set up Palmer Squared. So that's been going now for over 15 years. And we work across the country, and we have a really interesting selection of clients that we work with. And then one of the projects that we were working on was something that turned into a website called creativetourist.com, which is a what's on listings website that promotes the cultural offer across the north. It started off promoting Manchester's museums and galleries, and then very quickly expanded. Because after Manchester International Festival, I was asked to go and lead the strategic marketing unit for Manchester at Marketing Manchester. So it was moving from the council into Marketing Manchester. So I I went for about 3 months and was there for a couple of years, part-time as a consultant still. And I got to work on so many projects, not just in arts and culture and tourism, but working with Midas, the Inward Investment Agency, with all of the 10 boroughs of Greater Manchester, working on international projects, working with the New Economy, which Economic Development Unit, with all sorts of things that I would never have had the chance to do anywhere else. And
it's nice. It's nice to hear that, actually, because as a fellow Mancunian, as we identified before we came on air, interestingly, I know all these places.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Which is really nice, you know. So in fact, I've got a meeting, funnily enough, at Salford Quays later on today, and it's interesting for me to hear you talking about the Lowry Theatre, which of course I've been as a customer and a consumer. And now when I go again, and hopefully that won't be too long with the way things have been, I'll be able to go in and just think, oh, Helen sorted this out, you know, which is one of the nice things about doing these interviews. And of course, now of course, being a fellow Mancunian, we'll probably be seen as the Gallagher brothers now. Mad for it now. Mad for it.
Oh, that makes me cringe. That makes me
it does.
Cringe. I am a City fan, but in a week that thankfully the European Super League is not going to happen, and the shame of my club being part of that, but they've apologised today.
No, that was absolutely it. So you must have been, you know, a lot of, I think one of the things we talk about a lot on Passions is people's abilities or opportunities to turn their passions into careers or businesses. And you're living proof of somebody who's done that. When you look back, what would you say you did, or how did you approach it to help ensure that you were one of the relatively few, actually, Helen? Some people take it for granted, but what would you think the key drivers were to ensure that you were able to get into earning a living from your passions and or staying there?
Well, sheer bloody minded determination. I was brought up surrounded by strong women, in my mum, my grandmothers, and that sense of you know, you should be able to do what you want to do. Now, I know I'm in a privileged position in comparison to other people who want to and do work in the sector. I've not had the same kind of barriers to deal with.
Yeah.
But I did realize very quickly when I'd applied for lots of jobs, and because, you know, I graduated in the middle of a recession in the early 90s, nothing like what we're in now, obviously. But I realized very quickly that I needed to make contacts, and it might not come across, but I am a naturally shy person, and the ability to network in our sector is absolutely crucial. And so I did my homework. I attended conferences. I would, you know, that plucky 20-something kind of going and pestering someone quite senior in the sector and saying, could I just have a quick word with you? And the interesting thing is some of them were brilliant, really supportive, really helpful. Some of them a bit dismissive. And it's really interesting because I remember one, and I can't name the person, who was quite dismissive, and I don't think they'd even remember now, but I am now a colleague of, you know, and work with quite regularly, and they don't remember that they weren't really interested in talking to me when I was up and coming. And so I'm always really, really keen when I get approached by students or graduates to see if I can help and just give some advice, contacts, that kind of thing, because it made a difference to me when I was coming through. And I think, you know, the reason I got the job at the Royal Exchange Theatre was because I really, really wanted to work there. And so I joined the Friends organisation so that I could do volunteering. So I did front of house volunteering, and I volunteered in the costume hire department, and I got to know the teams. And then anytime jobs would come up, I would apply for the jobs. And I think in the end, they probably gave me a job just to shut me up. But I just worked very hard, and I did my research. I did my homework. I did all sorts of things just to really understand the sector that I wanted to work in. And, you know, this was before the internet. So, you know, that was, you know, now it's so much easier. So it was very much that sense of, this is how our sector works. Word of mouth is so important in our sector. And whether that's right or wrong, it is still the way. It is still about who you know. And we still have too many people in our sector who've got in who don't necessarily have the skills and expertise, particularly on the marketing side. It drives me insane when I see people thinking it's just a route in to get to the department they really want to work in. Used to have that a lot when I worked in theatre, and it was really people wanting to be on the stage, and I'd say, well, this is not the department for you. So yeah, my long-winded answer to that question, Phil, is hard work, research, networking.
Yeah, no, it's great that, because we provide something, a number of programs, consultancy, coaching, training type programs under the brand of Getting to Wow. And we utilize 12 key components that I've identified over years of research and interviews, about 600 in total now.
Wow.
One of the 12 elements is networking, reaching out to people, involving others, whatever you want to call it, but we just call it networking as a catch-all.
Yeah, it's critical. It's still so important, and now it's really, really important. And I think because I've been around a while now, I've got good connections. So it's good connections with other consultants, because we get a lot of work from other consultants bringing us in, and vice versa. So you have those regular consultants and other agencies that you work with, and you pitch for things together with former clients, some of which they bring us back in to do things, or those people move on somewhere else and then bring us in. And it's so important. So every project you do, you need to make sure it's a good experience all round, because they could be future clients. They will also recommend. So a lot is recommendations. I mean, we have to, pitch for a lot of work through formal tender processes, particularly with the public sector. I mean, wow, the hoops we have to jump through for relatively small amounts of money in comparison to, say, I don't know, big government contracts, is extraordinary.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, but due diligence and it's public money.
Yeah.
But it is so much about having your equivalent black book of contacts.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And one of the other 12 elements on there is what I call BHW, which is bloody hard work. And, it's clear from what you just said there. And one of the things that comes up a lot with these interviews is when you start to dig around is the amount of hard work that's gone in. And especially in a world where we're in a world of instant gratification and not arguably even instant gratification and entitlement. So the patience element, like Amazon, Amazon started to deliver and you got it within 2 days and you thought it was amazing. Then, of course, in Manchester before the pandemic, they were starting to deliver on the same day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everything's instant. So of course, in business, we all know it's very rarely is it instant. To build those rapports and those relationships and that know, like, and trust that you're talking about can take an awful long time.
Yeah. And I think, if you're going to work in this sector, you need to be a people person. You need to enjoy meeting lots of different people, understanding the politics around those relationships. And I have to say, I don't know if it's a slightly masochistic streak, but I do enjoy those kind of nitty-gritty, challenging discussions. I call them discussions that you can have with clients and stakeholders, a term we use a lot in our world, where you're working with partnerships with people with lots of different views and trying to bring them together in a kind of unified way so that they can work together going forward. So we work with a lot of, place is such a buzzword at the moment, but we've been doing it for years. So working in a geographical area where you're working with lots of partners and stakeholders, public, private sector, third sector, academic, you name it. And thinking about the purpose of that place and that destination and what it wants to achieve. So we do a lot of work around cultural tourism, heritage tourism, place branding, and destination marketing. And we actually, genuinely, it's another of our passions, because travel has always been a passion of mine, but I don't necessarily mean just international travel, which of course has ground to a halt, but discovering new places and getting under the skin of those places. And that's one of the things we try to do with our website, creativetourist.com, is when we talk about places, we want it to be more of an insider's view, and uncover those interesting cultural experiences that you might not necessarily find, as well as those, bigger, more established ones, because that's the thing that gets us excited. So if it gets us excited, we know it's going to get other people excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked there about film. So going, I suppose, what you might call to a deeper level of your passion. Is the particular types of film that you're into? Is it Dirk Bogart, or showing me age now, or Paul Newman?
I was lucky enough to meet him years and years ago when he did a talk at the Royal Exchange Theatre. Lovely man, much smaller than you think.
Wow, a bit like me, really. I'm a lot smaller than people think. They all ever see me on here, and I'm only 5'5". Anyway, that's another conversation.
I'll tell you about how deep my passion for film is. In my spare time, I did a master's in film, in humanities, film, and a PhD, which I completed last year.
Wow.
I'll be honest, if I knew what PhD entailed, I'm not sure I really would have started it. I just thought it was a master's, but bigger. It really isn't. So I don't know if you can see behind me over. Oh, get my finger right there.
Yeah, I always have this problem as well.
Yeah, that half poster there is actually a Portuguese lobby card for An Affair to Remember, starring Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr. So it's classic Hollywood, but my PhD was in Hollywood musicals, which combines two of my passions of dance and film.
Right. So musicals is something that you really love.
Yeah. I have to say, more of the older musicals rather than some of the contemporary musicals, where a lot of them don't really do it for me. I love things where there's a really strong melody and wonderful lyrics, and so I'm
Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Yeah.
Is that a good example?
Yeah. So, when I was little, because I did dance, I had a weak ankle when I was young, and so my mum, who was a school nurse and always looking for creative ideas, took me to dance classes to strengthen my ankle, and so I did ballet and tap as one of those little girls who did that. I still have my Royal Academy of Dance certificates and medals, so my passion for dance started very early, and I was torn between wanting to be Margot Fontaine, who was a prima ballerina with the Royal Ballet, or Sid Charisse. Obviously, everybody remembers that green dress in Singing in the Rain. I was never going to be anywhere near either, but I maintained that passion. And funnily enough, when I was doing in the early years of my PhD, because it took me 7.5 years doing it very part-time, because there were some years I just was too busy with work and I couldn't do very much, and so I had to keep putting it down and picking it back up. And I realized how much I missed doing dance, so I started an adult ballet class again about 6 or 7 years ago, and I absolutely love it. I mean, I'm never going to be brilliant, but I love it, and it just I feel it very much. It's an emotional connection for me, and it's very hard to describe how it makes me feel, but do you know what, Helen?
You can tell.
Yeah.
And it's true. I've done quite a few interviews now, and it's amazing how when you start to talk to people about their passions, they light up.
Yeah. So here, wrong one. There is half of a picture that's different ballet costumes. So and I've been so fortunate during lockdown to watch so much fantastic dance, and I've been really encouraged to see how so many dance companies have been really creative about choreographing for the camera, but also companies all over the world that I would never get to see their work, that I've always known about, or they might tour to the UK occasionally and they might come up to the Lowry. So that's been one. I mean, I was watching Ballet BC last night, who are Canada company. And so it's been one of the things that's helped me through COVID is watching old films. So I'm currently participating in hashtag Precode April on Twitter. So it's watching a pre-code film every day and then talking about it on Twitter. And Carol Morley, who's a filmmaker originally from Stockport, who in the first 20 weeks of the first lockdown, she did a Friday film club where she chose a film that was publicly available that either was written and or directed by a woman with a strong female cast or lead from all over the world, all different eras, and we watched that and chatted about it on Twitter. And it's going to be interesting in years to come. I think our memory of what it was like in those early days of COVID will start to dissipate. But in those early days where we really didn't know how long it was going to be, well, we still don't really know, but the kind of sense of isolation and disconnection, to have something like that to look forward to and connect with a community was so important. And it's like you've got a whole new group of friends that you've actually never met in person, but you have this shared common interest.
When I look back, it's interesting you should say that, because when I look back at it, I was really excited. And that sounds awful, because obviously on the health grounds, and people were suffering and all the rest of it. So I'm parking that aside a minute. But I remember thinking, because I'm quite a creative person, and believe me, when I say creative, as my dad used to say, you couldn't draw your breath. So I can't draw, I can't,
Me neither.
I can't art, but I am very creative business ideas wise. So the idea that clients were coming to me and saying, right, okay, we're in the deep doo-doo. We need your help to try and create some adapting, pivoting, they called it, or the cliche, didn't they? But the pivoting and the acting, I was like, I was in my element, because it took me into this creative place of figuring out, how are you going to make money? How are you going to survive? And that was the words that I kept using. Forget about growth, which was the conversation before. How are you going to survive so that when you come out the other end, you've still got oxygen in your lungs, and you can then crack on with the new scheme of things, whatever that looks like. And I think the other driver as well, and I'd be interested to get your views on this, was suddenly we had time to think and time to play, in a sense, rather than rushing about, jumping in the car, jumping out the car, jumping on the tram, as we in Manchester. We suddenly had time to think and reflect and consider, and that was luxury.
Yeah, and I think one of the things for us is with our companies, because my brother and I run Palmer Squared, and then we're also two of co-directors of CTConsults with three other directors. And we spent so much time on the train, traveling around the country. Sometimes you would travel for hours to go to a meeting that could last an hour or so, and then you get back on the train. And to not have to do, and obviously we'd be working on the train, but to not have to do that, and hopefully we won't have to do as much of that going forward, because now we're all very comfortable with video meetings, although, constant video meetings every day is exhausting. But the ability to say, do you know what, let's have a video meeting. And then when we need to come down and spend a bit more time, and particularly when we start on a project, it's really important to meet people in person, to go and see the place, to go and see the organizations. You can't replace that by video. To do that. But then once you've established that relationship, you shouldn't have to keep doing that kind of ridiculous amounts of traveling for, an hour or an hour and a half's meeting. And so, but the thing for us was, yes, on the one hand, we had more time to think, but on the other hand, we had to very quickly think, how are we going to continue to pay our staff? How are we going to continue to run our business when most of our work has just stopped? It's just been put on hold. So we had to very quickly go into that creative idea generation to think, right, well, this is what we could do. And, we have a brilliant MD, Alex Saint, and she she really helped steer us through that. Luckily, we'd also pre-COVID just joined the one of the Growth Hub programs in Greater Manchester for creative industries. So we had a resource that we could draw on to help us, which has been phenomenally helpful, actually. So the timing was perfect in that sense, and we're still drawing on that support locally. But I wouldn't say it was like we had masses more time to think. It was more that we're using the time in a different way to creatively brainstorm how to keep our businesses going and how to still fulfill the client requirements, and how to make sure that when businesses were ready to come back, that we were front of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And prepared and ready for it. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It's funny because I've had a couple of conversations with people recently, and people talk about being zoomed out at the moment, don't they?
Yeah.
And all about zoomed out. And I've said to a few people, when you're stuck in a jam on the M60 and you're an hour late for a meeting, it's peeing down with rain in October, and you've not moved for an hour and a half, you'll be looking back thinking, maybe I took it a bit for granted.
Yeah. Or the classic one where you're on your way home from Bristol and it's in the evening and your train's cancelled, and then the next train's cancelled, and you're thinking, am I going to have to stay overnight? I mean, I once got marooned in Birmingham because of snow on the line, and I had to go to a hotel. I had nothing on me. Traipse into the supermarket to buy some toothpaste, so all those sorts of things. It's like, no, haven't missed that at all.
Well, I've been saying to people for years, and my wife will back this up. But I've been saying to people for years that physical meetings were to a point were a cultural habit.
Yeah.
And I get exactly what you're saying. It's not about all suddenly everything happens. There's got to be some pressing of the flesh and having a coffee or a cup of tea or whatever and putting the world to rights maybe a little bit. That's how you establish proper relationships. But it's the number of meetings, like you said, that 1 hour meeting. So have the meeting, establish the rapport, establish that you've got something that you feel that you've got something in common, business wise, personal wise, whatever. But then the next 2 meetings, you do not need to drive down to Birmingham down the M6. And I think that what's changed, I suspect, is the idea of suggesting that 2 years ago would have sounded as if you were being lazy, or you weren't really that bothered. Maybe, or maybe it's kind of, well, I suppose so. All right, well, I'll do it. Whereas now I think it's just a sensible thing to do. And apart from anything else, apart from the time it takes, the more efficiency it creates.
Environmentally friendly.
There's environment bit. We're not pumping as much crap into the air. So surely it's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because my brother and I worked with a lovely client in London last year, the Museum of the Order of St. John, which is a small museum in Clerkenwell, which the collection dates back, and the buildings, to medieval era. So it's part of St. John Ambulance. So the Order of St. John is the forerunner to the establishment of St. John Ambulance. So they have this lovely collection. There's a small team. In between the lockdowns, we were able to go down and have a tour of the museum and all its buildings and meet the team. That was the only time we met them in person, and we were working on the project over the course of maybe nearly a year. But we'd established that relationship, and there's something about being on Zoom when people can see into your house. I mean, I haven't arranged this. This is my office. This is what it looks like. But where there's an element of that personal that comes through, and I find that a lot of clients are a bit more relaxed in this way on video than they would be if you were sat in a meeting room with them. And so
it's amazing you should say that. I do totally agree with that. In fact, we've been talking about it regarding passions because we've been doing some work on values and missions and purpose and all that kind of stuff.
We do all that,
Yeah, it's because it's important that we do that. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And what's been interesting in those debates is that one of the things that a few people have said is that you're interviewing people in their homes, so there's more intimacy. Yes,
yeah,
it's over the internet. Yes, it might not be as clear, as
yeah,
if you were doing a 4K camera shoot or whatever.
yeah,
But the
yeah,
time it's saving, but you're actually chatting to, I don't know, Austin Healey or Robin Cousins in their kitchen or in there, which just creates more of a, like I said, more of a chat feel
yeah,
rather than an interview feel.
yeah, yeah. What's been funny is that we've had to do pitches for work in this format. Now that is a challenge, whether you're on the panel or you're being interviewed, because you're trying to watch different reactions on the screen and not interrupt people, and it's a very different dynamic, and what you find is quite often that sometimes it's almost more formal because people are going, well, we've got these set questions and we're going to do it in this way, and it becomes, you don't get the same rapport you would get in person in that situation. So there are pluses and minuses.
It's a completely different thing. I do a fair bit of work for Growth Hub and those sorts of organizations around the Northwest. And I've been doing a number of webinars for, I hate that word. I've been doing a number of webinars or training sessions, if you like, sometimes 2-3 hours long in some cases. And you've got 20, 30, 40 people that you are trying to train and teach and inspire and everything else. And I'm quite fortunate, I think, because I managed to make that progression relatively quickly. But I do know some of the people who are used to delivering that in classroom environments have really struggled. And I think
Yeah,
it's just because I'm crazy and a bit nuts. So I've got that energy going on,
yeah,
it's just in me,
yeah,
which helps, of course, in
yeah.
these situations.
I do some regular training for the Arts Marketing Association, and there's a small scale development program they do for smaller arts organisations that don't necessarily have a dedicated marketing person. So it's for chief execs to think about audiences, and we had to convert that into an online program last year. So myself and 2 other trainers. I mean, the Arts Marketing Association are great to work with because they have a really good team. They're very creative. Training is a core part of what they do. And actually, it worked a lot better than I was expecting, because we had to be really creative about how we did the sessions, because there was about 40 or 50 on the programme, and then you'd have smaller groups. Whereas they've just asked me this morning to do another session, which might have 300 to 400 on it. So I said, well, I'll just have to think about that. And yeah, I'm up for it. I like a challenge, but that's quite a different thing to do. So because even though I've got a big monitor at home, I won't see that many people on it.
Yes, the interactivity that is a challenge. The bigger the numbers get, it becomes more of a, what I call a host pipe approach, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Hammer them with information.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, if I'd been asked to do that in person, would I have said yes? I don't know. I may not have felt as confident to do that in person. So, it's got you thinking in different ways and thinking about different opportunities, and also testing yourself. Which
Absolutely. And I've been talking to clients and potential clients for years now about the use of multimedia in marketing and promotion. That's kind of the core of what we're about, in a way. Business development through multimedia. I mean, we do all sorts, but that's the core of where I get my buzz from, in a sense. And that conversation now is so much easier. When I talk now about setting up podcasts or setting up YouTube channels, there was a time where it was like, I'm not doing that, or you're not going to get me on screen, or you're not putting that camera near me, or you know it is. There's loads of phobias kicking in. But now the conversation is much more, I suppose it's much more accepted. It's much more bought into, I guess.
I think what's really been fascinating is we remember in those early days of the first lockdown, how the cultural sector rushed to throw stuff online. And there was so much stuff, and I have to say there was a lot that wasn't very good, and it made me cringe to see organizations doing that. They didn't stop to think about their brand, about what they should be doing. And I think it was the National Gallery who did that. They didn't rush. They stopped and they thought, right, let's approach it in this way. Now, of course, they got more resources, but those organizations who have been investing in digital, and I mean that across the board, I don't just mean artistic content, but I mean from a marketing perspective as well. Those who'd invested in that over years were the ones that came out doing really well, who have engaged with new audiences, expanded their audience base, and some of them also generating new income streams as a result of it. So there's been some amazing learning. The challenge is that for a lot of organizations, they were still reaching the same kinds of audiences predominantly just online. So we've still got a lot of work to do as a sector to think about, because I keep saying to clients, just because we're going to be reopening, do not forget those audiences that you've engaged with online, because that also includes people who don't live near you, who maybe are disabled and can't even get to you, who maybe are stuck at home as a carer or with young children or whatever it is. And you now have a relationship with them. So it's really important that you don't forget about them when you reopen. And so that thinking about, I work with our digital director at CTConsults, Dan Lucas, and we talk about passionate, he's passionate about the power of digital. And he has for years said, he gets very frustrated with the arts sector in that they get excited thinking about digital content from the perspective of the art, but not in engaging with audiences and tracking what they're doing to be able to measure that engagement and understand the return on investment, grow audiences, sell tickets, increase fundraising, get them sharing content, all of those, what he calls conversion goals. And he said, maybe now people are going to think we have to keep investing in digital as much as the in-person experience, and that they are actually integrated, and stop thinking about them as being this or that, but think about it as part of the holistic whole. So I really hope that through this awful crisis that there are some positives that come out for our sector, and also our ability to work with clients to make the difference happen. And we're doing some really big digital transformation projects actually in the world of tourism, because there's another sector that has been a bit up and down in its relationship to harnessing digital technology. I think the travel sector has done it really well, but tourism has been a bit behind. So, there's positives coming out of that. We've been working with the domestic tourism body in Ireland, Fulshire Island, with their industry suppliers to help them on their digital transformation journey. So they've had funding to develop new websites or upgrade their websites, but also to connect them to online travel booking systems, which probably sounds really dull, but it's about them getting to new markets and actually being able to do that now, because otherwise they'd be busy doing the normal and prepping for the season, whereas they've had to take stock and think, right, we've got to address that now. So hopefully when they do open up, they're in a much better position. And that gets us excited as well, is helping those organizations on their digital journeys.
Do you know, that's so insightful. I'm not just saying that. That is just so insightful. On a personal level, in the arena I'm in, I find that absolutely fascinating. So, and the great thing about it, of course, is that I'll often say to people, look, when we're finished with all this lockdown, we really must meet in person and have a coffee.
Oh, yeah.
There's no excuse, Helen, for us.
We're doing it. We're
doing it, and probably at Salford Quays, and then you can go back to your home spirit world, as it were. Listen, I'm not just saying this. I could really talk to you for a lot longer, and I will come.
I've really enjoyed it.
Got a few ideas. Yeah, well, for somebody who is not very confident and a bit shy, you've done a damn good job. That's all I can say on the matter.
Yeah, well, you know, I can put my front on. Years of experience of doing that. So
it always makes me smile, actually, because you know, so many people will say, "Oh, I'm shy. I don't really like to talk," whatever it might be that they say in that kind of arena, and yet Northerners can always talk.
Well,
really?
Nobody would say I couldn't talk, that's for sure.
Well, there you go. And that's all this is about, isn't it? So that's brilliant. Helen, thanks for joining me today on Passions. Your passions for everything you do just comes out. And it's, as I'd say a number of people I interview, it just the minute people start talking about passions, that they start to they just could go on for ages. You know, and some people say, well, what happens if I dry up? And I say, trust me, you won't dry up. And nobody's dried up yet. So thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time, because, you know, I know people's time is valuable at the moment. And I will see you for that tea or coffee around Salford Quays in the not too distant future. Brilliant. And thanks for joining me on Passions and sharing your stories and your passions with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Really enjoyed it. Look forward to that.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.